Hello and welcome to another edition of the Believe Fantasy Football Show. Lindsay Rhodes and Michael Fabiano back with you. How you doing, Fabs?
Doing all right. You know what I just noticed, though?
What?
Why do you have over your shoulder in a box on the wall, like a loser hand, and then you have like this? What exactly is going on back there?
It's hard to see because of the glare.
Yes.
From the window, but it spells out love with hand signal.
Oh, I thought you were secretly like calling me a loser all these
that too.
years.
Not secretly.
And I didn't realize it until like right now.
Overtly. I know, but it does because I blocked the rest of it so you could just see the L. And it's like who was that Smashbox? The L in the shape on her forehead? That line?
I don't know who Smashbox is.
Sorry.
I know who Smash Mouth is.
Yes, that's what it was. Well, so don't be a smartass. You know exactly who I was talking about. Just answer the question.
It's Candlebox and Smash Mouth. Anyways, I'm excited for this pod. You know why? Because we're going to talk Cowboys. And I'm going to get crap all over Jerry Jones and all over the Cowboys.
Yeah.
Because there's very little news going on in the National Football League right now. I mean, it is what it is.
And you're passionate about them boys.
I guess the biggest news is that the Cowboys are going to let it ride.
We'll see.
Dak.
We'll see. But yes, so that's the conversation that we're going to have today. Reminder first, if you haven't already, our last episode broke down our 5-round, 12-team mock draft that we did last week. We both tweeted out the draft board in case you're a visual learner like I am and need to follow along with something like that. You can find that at Lindsay_Rhodes on Twitter or Michael_Fabiano. As Fabs mentioned, we're going to talk about the Cowboys today, the news about Dak and the impact that storyline could have on fantasy this year and into the future. First, though, the tournament is here. I know you guys are all following along with your brackets. I didn't do one this year, Fabs.
I didn't either. I've had other things on my mind. I didn't do it, but I would have picked North Carolina to win it because I'm just a homer. So.
Yes, because you are a front-running homer and picked North Carolina back in the 80s. We got the whole story last time. I know. Anyway, that said, for those of you who are normal people and did participate in the bracket stuff, BetOnline is your bracket headquarters for this season with the best bracket contest out there. Odds, lines, info on every game and every round right up until the national championship. You can access the most up-to-the-minute wagering information anytime from your desktop or your mobile devices. And by the way, Fabs, that's a way that we could get involved after the fact, right? Like we could still do stuff here at BetOnline, even though we don't have a bracket. You can even track your bracket if you did fill one out real time all the way through the tournament. So head to BetOnline today, get in on all the action. Remember to use the promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That is BetOnline. The game starts here. Now to the Cowboys. I know that you're passionate about this subject matter. They've given you a lot of reasons for your various rants this offseason. It's been a frustrating one for you. I feel your pain.
You get a little bit excited about hearing Jerry Jones say publicly that the Cowboys are going all in.
All in.
And apparently going all in means losing 2 offensive linemen, a running back, and not replacing them, and signing no one on the offensive side. Eric Kendrich on the defensive side. Yippee-day! Big deal.
Love Eric, but yeah, we need more than that.
So then Jerry comes out and is very cryptic with what he's saying, even suggests that Ceedee Lamb might not be a Cowboy at some point in the future because he said, hopefully for us. So the Cowboys, and listen, I am not a general manager in the National Football League. I don't know how all the damn things work with all the numbers in the dough and all that kind of thing. I do know this. Dak Prescott's going to make $55.5 million this season. That's a lot of cheese. And if Dak does not lead this team to at least multiple playoff wins, if not a Super Bowl appearance, my guess is that he's gone next season, that he's absolutely gone in 2025. Because think about it. If you're Dak Prescott and you don't get the Cowboys at least to the NFC Championship game or the Super Bowl, you are going to get criticized left and right. He can't get the job done. Dak Prescott is never going to win a big game. He's never going to win the Super Bowl. This is what Dak is. He's good enough to lead a team to get beat in the playoffs. Being the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys is a thankless job. It's a very lucrative job where you get paid a whole crap load of dough. But if I'm Dak and I just made $55.5 million, say the Cowboys make the playoffs, and I don't even know if they're a playoff team. Say that the Cowboys make the playoffs and lose again. which is likely because that's, the last, 30 years basically. Dak goes and becomes a free agent in 2025. Dak has already been franchised twice. He's gone. If he wants to go and sign with anybody, he can go sign with anybody he wants. And there are going to be no shortage of teams to go and sign a quarterback in his prime, and he's going to get paid a lot of money. Now, if Jerry Jones wanted to pay all that money to Dak, the deal would have already been done, and we wouldn't be talking about this thing, right? But he's letting it ride into 2024 and through 2025. And oh, by the way, the first thing you think of is, well, I guess that's why they went and got Trey Lance. Trey Lance has got a 5th-year option the Cowboys would have to pick up for $22 million. So
without having seen him.
Guarantee that Trey Lance will be a Cowboy in 2025 because they ain't going to pick up that extension. Hell no. There's no way. So this, my friends, is very likely the last year that Dak will be a Cowboy unless something really miraculous happens, like we get to the damn Super Bowl or even an NFC Championship game. And after that, like him or not, Linz, like in fantasy, we love him. Like in fantasy, really outside of like 2022, he's been really good in fantasy. But from a real football perspective, he hasn't won the big game. He's made issues. He's made mistakes. And obviously against Green Bay, he made mistakes. Maybe it's time to cut the cord and go in a different direction. Now, I'm going to let you weigh in on the real football implications of that, because there's a lot of fantasy implications as well.
Well, there's so much just with the stuff that you just said. So I understand that Cowboys fans have high expectations every year at Super Bowl or bust, right? But how many, to your point of he hasn't won the big game, how many quarterbacks have? How many active quarterbacks have won the big game?
Well, I mean,
we've got Patrick.
Joe Burrow's gotten to a Super Bowl. Matt Stafford's gotten to a Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes, I mean, obviously we're not going to talk about him because he is on an elite level, even though he didn't have a good fantasy season, which I will point out.
Most of them haven't. Lamar hasn't. Justin Herbert certainly hasn't. Like Josh Allen hasn't. Like if this is the bar with which we're deciding whether or not quarterbacks come or go, I mean, wow. Like, and I would also argue, you're saying it's been 30 years for the Cowboys. You know who hasn't been around for 30 years? Dak. So maybe there's some other systemic problem that's happening within the Cowboys.
No question.
I.e. the person who is their general manager, who I think personally, just my opinion, should not be the general manager anymore.
Preach, Rhodes, preach.
So I have a hard time looking at this situation and thinking that we're not way overreacting in a way that is ultimately detrimental to your club. If you're going to look at what's happened with the Cowboys and place the blame squarely on Dak. Dak statistically last year led the NFL with 36 touchdown passes. Now, obviously, partially that has to do with the situation around him. The quarterback doesn't get credit for every offensive stat, right? But there were 36 passing touchdowns. So it was the most in the NFL. He only threw 9 interceptions. That's incredible. That touchdown to interception ratio, right? He was 3rd in passing yards. He was 3rd best in expected points added per play for the quarterbacks. He had the 3rd highest passing grade for a quarterback. He had the 4th highest offensive grade for a quarterback. So are we having a discussion where we say Dak is not a good enough quarterback, or the team, while Dak Prescott has been the quarterback, hasn't been good enough to win a Super Bowl? Because I think you are now playing a very dangerous game if you're the Cowboys by pushing this contract out. And I disagree with you slightly in the sense that what they're saying right now and the fact that no offers have been made, I'm not going to overreact to that information until we get into the season and we actually don't have a contract extension for Dak, because it's to me, it seems like such a bad business decision for the Cowboys to say, we're not going to do this now. Because if you don't do this now and you go into the season based on what happens this season, you're saying, well, unless he wins a Super Bowl, we don't bring him back. If he wins a Super Bowl, you're not bringing him back anyway. Because guess who's going to be so fucking expensive? Do you think that Dak, now Dak would have all the leverage? And by the way, he already has all the leverage. So do you really think that after you win a Super Bowl, Now you're going to go to Dak and go, now let's talk. You don't have to talk to me. You can talk to anyone in the whole NFL. Do you think Dak's going to go, you know what? You come at me with a number and I'll sign on the dotted line. No, he's going to go, I'm going to go to free agency and I'm going to see what the best offer is out there because I just won a Super Bowl and I'm a quarterback and we can get more and more and more money. And he gets, the longer that this gets dragged out, the higher his number goes because another quarterback's going to sign. Now Jordan Love is going to sign a contract, and now it's got to be more than Jordan Love. And you always got to up the next one. The number goes up and up and up and up. The earlier that you sign a quarterback, the better the chances that you're going to get value on that deal. We all laughed at Kyler Murray signing the contract that he signed thinking, oh my God, you don't even know. Like, are we sure about that? And you're going to give him this deal? Well, now a few years later, you're looking at those Kyler numbers and you're like, that's pretty reasonable, actually. Like, you're kind of getting a deal if you think he's a franchise quarterback and you're going to build around him. I'm not sure about that with Kyler. But with regards to Dak, the earlier you sign this quarterback, the better the deal is that you're going to get. It is only going to go up. So if he has the success that you want him to have, I think there's a strong chance that he goes, peace, enjoy that Super Bowl I gave you. Now I'm going to go to whoever wants to pay me the most money. And I don't necessarily need to give you any kind of hometown discount because you guys weren't willing to bet on me before. F you. Like, he has all the leverage, Fabs, all of it.
I disagree with you, but at the end of the day, the Cowboys ain't winning a Super Bowl. It's like that ain't gonna matter. All right. I mean, it's just not. So bottom line,
what part? Well, just out of curiosity, what part do you disagree with?
If Dak Prescott wins a Super Bowl, it would be the first time the Cowboys won a Super Bowl since 1995, and we've gone through a number of quarterbacks, right? I mean, the best obviously being Tony Romo and now Dak. Before that, it was a bunch of garbage. No offense, guys, but I mean, Anthony Wright and Chad Hutchinson, and I could name off a whole bunch of them, and I'm not going to do that. If you let Dak go after he wins you a championship, that would be very strange, and I think the fan base would revolt. And Jerry Jones, who likes to, Jerry Jones will typically sign guys to big deals that he drafted. He has typically done and overpaid.
You're like making my point. Example. They'd have to overpay to keep him. So, and they couldn't even guarantee that he'd say yes to that. They would have to literally come in with the highest number because they'll get other offers. They would have to go over those other numbers in order to get him back. And now, to your point, in your word, they're overpaying him. So just sign him now.
Yeah, I think they want him to prove that he can win big games. And honestly, like, think about it too. You got to pay Ceedee at some point. You got to pay Micah at some point. You got to pay Tyler Smith at some point. And so, and Dak's a $40 million dead cap hit in 2025. So, like, the Cowboys, and again, you're right. I mean, Jerry Jones should not be a general manager of, a Target, for Christ's sake. Okay. But I mean, the bottom line here is that it's just, it hasn't worked out. And the Cowboys are probably not going to win a Super Bowl. Maybe they get to the playoffs. They're not going to win the division unless the Eagles completely collapse like they did in the second half of last year, which is unlikely. So the Cowboys are going to be looking at potentially a wild card spot. And that's it. And really, to me, this has major fantasy implications as well beyond what I would bitch and moan about as a Cowboys fan. And that is, first off, Ceedee Lamb is the number one wide receiver in fantasy football right now. He's better than everybody coming off of last season, and Justin Jefferson's quarterback situation is Sam Darnold or a rookie. So I think Ceedee's the number one wide receiver in fantasy football. If Ceedee Lamb goes into 2025 and Dak Prescott's not the quarterback, the Cowboys aren't going to be able to go out and sign any big name quarterback. I don't even know, looking ahead, who would be available. They'd be looking to potentially bring back Trey Lance, obviously not at a 5th-year extension of $22 million, and say, hey, kid, this is your big shot. You're going to be the starter for the Dallas Cowboys. Ceedee Lamb's value goes down. I don't know who our running back is going to be. Maybe it's Jonathan Brooks. Maybe it's Trey Benson. I hope it's not J.K. Dobbins. Sorry, J.K. But the value of almost every player on that offense could potentially collapse to some degree if Dak Prescott's not the quarterback. Why? It's not that Dak Prescott is great, but Prescott has been very good from a fantasy perspective and statistically, but I just don't know what else is going to be out there where the move from Dak to another quarterback is a lateral move. It's almost likely to be a downgrade. And Ceedee Lamb, if Dak is no longer in the mix, maybe Ceedee wants to go someplace else. Now the Cowboys are going to be able to franchise him, etc. But they can't franchise Ceedee and Micah, when the time comes. Like, both these guys are going to need to get paid. So this is the last year, Linz, where we're getting Dak in Dallas. Unless a miracle happens, pigs fly and the devil turns blue and the Cowboys win a Super Bowl, unless that happens, he's gone. And he's going to make a lot of money someplace else. And then I'm not saying the Cowboys are going to be rebuilding, but they are not going to be a team that people are going to be talking about as playoff contenders, divisional contenders. Just not. Because the quarterback is going to be maybe at best Trey Lance. And he's wicked unproven. I mean, hell, the Niners moved up to get him, drafted him, third overall, and they gave up on him after a year and a half. So from a fantasy standpoint, first off, if you're in a dynasty league, Trey Lance should be out there, should not be out there, excuse me. But if he is, somehow pick him up. And if you have Ceedee Lamb, if you have Jake Ferguson, I'm not saying that you go out and look to trade these guys, but if somebody offers you like a Godfather crazy ass type of deal for a Lamb, at least you might want to think about it. I'm not saying do it. I'm saying you might want to think about it, because think about the future. Dynasty is very different than redraft. We know Dak's the quarterback in Dallas in 2024. We don't know that beyond. It's the same kind of thing with Garrett Wilson. Or if they draft Brock Bowers. Okay, well, Aaron Rodgers will be the quarterback this upcoming season, we hope, for a full year. What about after that? He's going to be 41 in December. Like, you have to look at these kind of things. And for me, it would be impossible for me to trade Ceedee Lamb. I'd have to get Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson or something like that, and maybe a little bit more, maybe like a late draft pick in addition to jettison Ceedee Lamb. But there is a legitimate chance that Ceedee Lamb will be catching passes from another quarterback in 2025 and beyond.
I do think, with regard to the point about Trey Lance, that if their plan is to go into the season without a contract for Dak, I would be a little bit surprised if they didn't draft a quarterback this year. Like, you have to come up with a plan. If you know that there's a chance you're going to move on from your quarterback, like Colin Cowherd recently did a thing on his show about why the fact that they should move on from Dak Prescott, in his opinion. And he used Green Bay as an example and was like, if they can move off of Rodgers, then Dallas can certainly move off of Dak Prescott, who is not Aaron Rodgers. I think that it's not an apples to apples comparison, because Green Bay had planned for a post Aaron Rodgers team and roster several years in advance. They had Jordan Love just sitting there that they'd used a first round pick on. They developed him. They knew he was ready to go in and play, which gave them some flexibility with regard to Aaron Rodgers, who was at a point in his career where it totally made sense. Dak is not on the back nine of his career. He's in the thick of it right now. And you don't have a backup plan right now. And if you want to say that it's Trey Lance, I mean, I guess, but I hope that he's been showing out on the practice field and you've seen stuff that no one else has seen, because I don't have confidence that he's the guy that steps in capably in Dak's absence and runs this offense. I don't have any reason to believe that. I don't know. So I would be a little bit surprised if they were like, this is our plan, and maybe we bring him back, but maybe we don't. Then they have to plan for that. So I would be a little bit surprised if they didn't try to like do the Bo Nix, Michael Penix range of quarterback somehow in this year's draft. But the problem is, because you got to come up with a backup plan.
Right. But those guys are going to be gone way before the Cowboys are going to draft a quarterback. Right. So like the Cowboys have to draft an offensive lineman in round one. They have to. You're down 2, including a Hall of Famer. You have to draft an offensive lineman. And in round 2, you have to get round 2 or 3. You got to get a running back. And you got to get another offensive lineman. They've got to draft multiple offensive linemen and a running back.
You don't need to get that in round 2. You don't need to do that.
But here's the thing. What quarterbacks are going to be available in round 2? And why would the Cowboys draft a quarterback in round 2 that is a project type when they already have a project type that they potentially could bring back in Trey Lance? I mean, they picked 51st in the
because of the words that you just used, project and probably. And so you got to come up, like if you're going to give yourself any kind of leverage with regard to Dak in this negotiation, Dak's side needs to look at you and go, oh, I see that they actually do have a plan. They have some leverage. There is a quarterback here that they could potentially develop and move on to that would maybe be smart for them because financially is a lot less expensive than me. Like, they have nothing. They have nothing, and I don't know where they would go to pivot. And then another layer of this, Fabs, becomes other teams that, like, we've had all this discussion about the Patriots sitting at 3, right? And I think that they need to go get a quarterback, but there's another conversation out there about them trading down and looking at their roster and saying, we're too far away right now. Let's build up the roster and then get a bridge guy in there right now, as they have, and then plug in a quarterback next year when we're more ready to compete and take advantage of that rookie deal for that quarterback. Now, if you're a team like the Patriots, this potentially affects your strategy going into next year, because if you're like, well, there's actually, my read of the situation is that Dak might be available next season, right? Those teams that feel like they have to draft a quarterback now might actually think that they could take the Falcons approach next year and just go get that guy on free agency that they think that they could plug in once they've built up their roster. This has like a massive trickle down effect for a lot of different teams, I think.
The Cowboys are 56 in round 2, not 51. So I misspoke there. I still think the Cowboys go after a running back there because really, I mean, like, the best quarterback was going to be available at 56. Penix is going to be long gone. Nix is going to be long gone. I don't know if there's another quarterback who's even worth a second round
that's
pick.
Where the general manager comes in, Fabs, that I don't think that they have capably, and they got to move the board. You don't just sit and pick where you're supposed to pick. Like, make some moves.
It's possible that, but I think when Jerry Jones said he's all in, it meant this year, because I think he knows that big parts of this team will not be there in 2025. That means if he's all in for 2024, you're probably drafting 2 offensive linemen in the first 4 picks and a running back somewhere amongst them, not a quarterback, because you got Lance. I mean, Cooper Rush is still on the team, so I don't know that they're going quarterback. And maybe the discussion is that the Cowboys are going to make a push to keep Trey Lance beyond 2024 and give him a shot, because otherwise, I don't know what the hell they did with that 4th round pick. It was a total waste of a pick to send him. The Niners send him packing for a 4th. Like, does the Cowboys, hey, have a 4th for free? What the hell? Go ahead. So if Dak is going to be gone, I would think he's got to be in their plans, just not at that 5th year option at $22 million, which is crazy. But moving on from that, I think another thing you have to remember, and we talked about running backs here, is that for as much as I will crap on the Cowboys for the offseason that they have had or not had, they've been asleep at the wheel. They typically do well in the draft. They have had some pretty good success in the draft. And so whether it's Jonathan Brooks or Trey Benson or whoever else they decide that they want to have in their backfield for next season, that running back is going to be a sleeper breakout candidate in fantasy. And I look back, and I didn't go back to like Tony Dorsett and Emmitt Smith, because you guys know those guys are, Hall of Famers, but if you go back to like 2014, DeMarco Murray, I believe he was a top 10 running back in 13. In 14, he was the RB2 behind Le'Veon Bell. And then he left for Philadelphia the year after that and wasn't as good. And Darren McFadden, who is not, like this great running back, although he was drafted very highly out of Arkansas by the Raiders. McFadden ended up finishing as the RB13 that year, and he only started 10 games. Because if you remember, Joe Randall started as the Cowboys' number 1 back that year, and then he had all kinds of off-field issues. But if you combine Randall and McFadden's numbers in their starts, they were the RB2 that year. And then they drafted Zeke, and Zeke, did what Zeke did, and he was great. And then Pollard came along. But since 2013, the Cowboys have not had a running back starting in their backfield finish worse than 14th. So that's notable, because no matter who they take, and I don't know if it's going to be Brooks or Benson, or maybe it's neither. I have no clue. Whoever is starting in that backfield for Dallas in 2024, because we don't know the structure of this team after that with Dak, that guy is going to be a big-time sleeper breakout candidate, Linz, because he's going to get a lot of work. I don't see Rico Dowdle or Deuce Vaughn putting a big dent into the touches of what might be a 2nd round running back that they draft.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of mock drafts that have Jonathan Brooks going to Dallas in that second round.
Yeah, the Texas connection, sure.
I don't know, man. I don't know. This feels like just a big incomplete, because I also think it's a weird, just strategically, and trying to think of like what's going on in the Cowboys' minds, or specifically Jerry Jones in this case.
Good luck with that.
Why he would say, why you would put Dak in this position, I suppose. Like, because it feels like they haven't made moves to put him in a better situation. We've had conversations about Will Levis in Tennessee and the fact that they've made so many moves this year to put people around him that we will get a very good evaluation on Will Levis this season, right? At the very least with him. So you're putting him in a position to succeed, and now you have an answer. If you're going into the last year of Dak's contract and you're like, hey, the entire future of our franchise, of your career, all of it here in Dallas is going to ride on or what happens this season. But we're also not going to do a whole lot to actually set you up to succeed. The whole thing just feels weird and very un-Dallas-like, but also very Dallas-like in that, like, they kick the can down the road constantly and then end up having to overpay. The Zeke Elliott deal is just the last really bad running back deal that we're likely to ever see, right? Like, it's one that you use as an example of what not to do with running backs. And part of the reason that they were in that position was because they kicked it right to the last second and then had to have him. And so they ended up overpaying. And I'm just afraid that that's the position that they're putting themselves in with Dak Prescott. I don't know that there's a better there is a better option out there. And to your points, like, it's not that Dak is obviously the guy who's going to get it done for you, but I certainly think he's good enough. And I agree with just the general sentiment that if you don't have, like, if you have an average quarterback, that's the worst position to be in, because it's tough to tear that down when it looks like they're good enough. I would rather have an obviously good enough quarterback to win it all, or a bad quarterback, so that I at least know my answer and I got to go get a different one and try it again. The middle of the road quarterback is the absolute toughest. I don't know that I think that that's who Dak is. I think Dak is an above average quarterback. I think he's certainly good enough to get it done if you put pieces around him. He's not the guy who's going to, like, he's not a Patrick Mahomes. He's not somebody who's going to, rise all boats in this tide. But if you give him the right boats, right, like, then he'll go along with them. That analogy ran out. I didn't know where else to take that. But you know what I mean? Like, I think he's good enough. And I think you're going to find yourself in a really tough position where you're going to feel like you maybe have to overpay him if you don't get something done this offseason, or you're going to have to downgrade. And Jerry Jones is, at this stage of his life, never going to be in a position where he's going to feel comfortable going, you know what? We're rebuilding. This one's going to probably not be our best year, but we'll be fine in 3. Like, I don't think that he's that guy. So the whole thing is perplexing.
That it's the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah.
If you are the Arizona Cardinals and you just won 12 games for 3 straight years, you are loving it, right? Even though you probably didn't get anywhere in the playoffs. This is 3 straight years. The Cowboys, you lost in the wild card round. You lost in the division round. You lost in the wild card round. The Niners kicked our ass. Green Bay kicked our ass this past season. Dak's rookie year, the Cowboys are 13-3. That was the whole Romo thing, like, bring Romo in or not. And lost in the divisional round there too. Lost in the divisional round in 2018. Listen, that's just simply not, it's just not good enough. And I know that when you look at Dak and you look at Romo, like, Romo, got us to not very far either. Right. I mean, like, obviously we got cheated out of the Green Bay game where Dez caught it. But it will go down as an incompletion, which is complete another crap. I won't get into that. Then you got the Vaseline ball in Seattle with Romo as the holder, just some bad luck. But at the end of the day, and I think Dalton Schultz said this when he was talking about the Cowboys, I think it was on the Pat McAfee show, basically said it's like a circus. Like, guys are working out. Guys are like in a zoo. They're like a circus attraction. Like, it has everything to do with the atmosphere in Dallas. And ever since Jimmy Johnson's left, and again, Switzer won with Jimmy's team, you've had puppet head coaches besides Parcells, and McCarthy's a puppet too. And I know he's won 12 games, 3 straight years. Good for him. It ain't good enough in Dallas. And so there comes a point where the money becomes so much that, well, I mean, we've given this guy how many years and he's gotten us beat in the playoffs every time we've gone. We've been disappointed. We have talent around him. I mean, listen, the Cowboys had a talented
Is he
team
better? Is he better than Kirk Cousins?
As a quarterback? No, I don't think he is. I'd rather have Kirk Cousins. But age-wise, if Dak and Kirk Cousins were at the same age, I'd rather have Kirk Cousins. But
Kirk Cousins, at his age, coming off a torn Achilles, just got a 4-year deal worth $180 million and $100 million effectively guaranteed. That's what the Cowboys are looking at with Dak.
Yeah.
Like, you have to understand that that's at least on the table for him if he hits free agency. So this whole playing hardball when you have absolutely no leverage, unless you're willing to tear it down and rebuild, I don't see an out for them. Let's from a fantasy standpoint in the short term, because you talked about dynasty implications, which I think totally makes sense. We have to approach them with a little bit more caution because we don't know what the setup is past this season. In redraft this year, if Dak is on a prove it year, if he goes into the season without a contract, are you more in on Dak? Like, what do you think that ends up looking like for us in fantasy this season?
I don't know how much higher I can go on him because Allen's going ahead of him. Hurts is going ahead of him. Even though Mahomes was bad last year, Mahomes is going to go ahead of him, certainly at the quarterback position. I think Stroud's probably going to go ahead of him. I think Burrow is going to be in the conversation and go ahead of him, but then that's it. I mean, unless I'm missing somebody off the top of my head, I think that's kind of Dak's going to be in that, 5, 6, 7 range at quarterback. And I don't know if there's room to push him up any higher.
Yeah.
Even though he was better than some of the guys that I just mentioned a season ago. He's always, look, Dak Prescott's numbers. We're looking at the last 5 years. 21 points a game, 27 points a game. That was the year he was on pace to go insane, like nuclear crazy. And then he had that horrible injury against the Giants, and that was the end of it. 20 points per game. And then he had the crappy year in 22 where he averaged 16. He was throwing the ball to the wrong team too much. And then last year he bounced back at 20, about 20.2 points per game. So Dak is a 20-point per game quarterback in fantasy. For the majority of his last 5 years, he has been that. And he will be. Listen, the Cowboys can replace Tony Pollard. All right. You hope that you hit home runs in the offensive line in the draft.
Right.
And the Cowboys have done well in the draft. I mean, Tyler Smith, we were like, what? Tyler Smith, and he's been pretty good. Travis Frederick. I mean, you can go back to the Cowboys have done well in the draft. I mean, I give him credit. I'll give him crap for everything else, but I give him credit in the draft. Outside of Taco Charlton, I mean, they typically have done okay. So bottom line here is that this offense probably is not going to lose much of a step off of last year's team, but this is it. This is it, right? I don't remember who sung that song. Make no mistake who you are. This is it. Go ahead and Google it because I can't remember, but it's a great song. Right. I think it came out of the 70s. Shocking. Right. But
well, we know it's not post 1990 or you wouldn't know it.
Let's stop it. But that's kind of this is I think this is the final run for Dak unless they go to the NFC Championship game or Super Bowl minimum.
Kenny Loggins.
Thank you. Yes, well done. So that's 80s. That's not 70s. That's 80s. Very well done. But bottom line here is that this offense is still going to be very fantasy friendly. Ceedee is still going to be awesome. Dak's going to be very good. The running back situation, what?
Is it Kenny Loggins or is it Michael McDonald? They're both coming up.
Maybe it's together. Maybe it's a duet. Maybe it's a duet. Michael McDonald is awesome. I can't do it. I don't even know what that was. But I'm trying to think of Michael McDonald songs. Anyways, we could sing on another edition of the Believe Fantasy Football Show. But the Cowboys are going to be very fantasy friendly. I think Jake Ferguson's going to be awesome again. He's going to be very good. Bottom line here is that this might be the end of the road for this team led by Dak Prescott, unless things go in a very positive direction, which they have not gone since 95.
Did you enjoy this episode more or less because it was all about Cowboys, but it was also bad?
Any podcast that I can do with you, Lindsay Rhodes, is a pure
There you
joy.
go. Okay. Speaking of which, we're not going to do a podcast together next week. Next week, I am going to be out of town, fully engaged in spring break with my family. And so
I know you're going to be gone next week.
Yeah.
We got the show will be a little older next week. Robert Harris, the great Bob Harris. I will make sure that he has taken his Metamucil and had his cream of wheat, and he's ready to roll.
All right. Well, looking forward to that, Fabs. Again, as I do at the end of every episode of the Believe Fantasy Football Show, I want to ask you to do us a quick favor. And wherever you're listening right now or watching, just hit that like button, hit that subscribe button so that future episodes can be there waiting for you in your inbox. You don't have to go looking for it. Let us know what you like, what you don't like on social media. Fabs can be reached at Michael_Fabiano. I'm Lindsay_Rhodes on Twitter. And we're happy to engage with you with your fantasy questions, things that you want to hear us talk about on future episodes of the podcast. I want to thank you for listening to the Believe Fantasy Football Show presented by BetOnline.